Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another New York Comic Con interview by the Comics Pals. I'm here with Patrick Horvath. Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time, and I want to jump right into it.
Sure.
Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees has been a phenomenal comic that's come out recently, growing with each order
Yeah.
of issue. And we just came out of the ICB2 panel, and
Yo, right
they
on.
Recently told us that it was one of the #2
Yeah,
top sellers for graphic novels.
We made
So
number 2 for September. It's blowing my mind. Yeah, it's nuts.
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It's a huge book, and I appreciate the writer-artist aspect of it very
right
much
on.
so. I love when you get to have a creator be able to not only dictate the words, but also navigate the story and the representation of that.
Sure.
How do you sort of think about putting not the words first and not the arts first, but those two together and being able to present a cohesive narrative?
I feel like I mean it jives really well with what I'm used to, mainly because I come from a pretty much like do-it-yourself background, especially in filmmaking. That was really what pulled me into like thinking about comics seriously around like 2012 or so.
Okay.
I'd done a couple of features with friends that we'd been producing each other's stuff. And then after our second feature we'd done, I was just sort of like, well, I miss drawing. And so I started drawing again. And then I was also like, boy, if I got better drawing, I could probably do comics. And then I could really scratch the itch to tell stories and have a much lower hurdle of like how to get it across the finish line. It's a lot cheaper. Okay. It's much more reasonable. You can have like way more control.
Yeah,
and so when it comes to just being like a cartoonist, I feel like it's the ability to sort of have that amount of control over everything, every aspect of it. Like what's insane to me is the fact that like I have this book now. It's exactly the book I wanted.
Yeah.
And when I've worked in movies, like if you can get like 80% of like what you were hoping for, like that's amazing. Like that's amazing. So like it's one of those things that you hope that like, you get to continue doing this thing that is honestly, it's hard to keep doing. It's taxing just physically, but also it's just like, it's hard to kind of keep the day-to-day grind of making comics just like financially, and making all that work out. So
100%.
so it's one of those things where it's, at the moment right now, like I made this comic that has totally caught a wave.
Yeah.
And like the best news I can say is that like I get to make more comics.
100%. And I feel like you mentioning that sort of cinematic background.
Sure.
I guess you can also liken it to when you have your cinematographer versus your writer versus your director. Right?
Oh, yeah.
There's so many opposing forces to trying to create that vision.
Oh, sure.
Here,
Sure.
you're just like, I want this from this perspective and this angle.
I mean, to sort of bounce off that too, what's funny is that in my head, I kind of have all those things talking in my head. Like I've got a cinematographer, I have a production designer that's helping build the world.
Sure.
I have wardrobe that's like putting on the clothes for everybody.
Okay.
I have prop people that are like getting the right prop for all the stuff that fits with the setting and the characters, and like I have all those elements, kind of different department heads in my own head that are like sort of informing like a lot of the stuff. That it's kind of a weird way I've kind of compartmentalized all that. And then a director, and then actors, and like I'm thinking about performance, as I'm drawing the characters and stuff like that.
Is that so? Do you act these things out? Like do you see yourself in Sam? Do you see yourself in something
100%,
like Nigel?
yeah.
Like are there ways? Maybe not the murderous aspect necessarily, right? But you want
no, the murder too. Yeah,
specifically.
No, but yeah, minus the murder. There's a lot of myself in Sam for sure, and then honestly in every character, even Cherry Gherkins, like everybody that's in the book, there's a bit of me in them, and it's honestly the way that I get into it. I would imagine as an actor, where you get into the character, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then that's how I write, and I kind of feel like they have peculiarities based on their own psychologies that I'm leaning into to kind of help it work with their character in the story, right? But the there's definitely like a lot of myself that I'm bringing to it.
And working off that psychology angle, one of the things that I really appreciated about your construction of the pages and of page turns is your way that you use suspense, right?
Oh, sure.
You can kind of keep everything onto a singular page and follow it narratively, but there's something in the page turn that allows you to get shocked.
Oh, sure.
The first time we see Sam doing her work, it's a huge page turn.
Yeah.
And it's a full body, right?
Yeah.
Floored. I saw that and I thought, disgusting, and I loved it. How do you think about that?
I mean, it's interesting. Somebody pointed out to me that in the first book, it like through issues 1 through 6, a lot of the violence, there's a lot of them that come out as like tableau, like it's almost like a post scene of something,
Yeah.
of like that reveal of Daniel Brewer the duck, or like the or like when you see Cherry when her body's discovered like the next morning,
Yeah.
or even in the spoiler alert. Like when you get to the end and you see
Of
like
issue 1 even.
the issue 6.
Oh, okay, for
and
sure.
issue the end of issue 1, like all that stuff.
You use it so often. I loved it.
Yeah. And as opposed to like the violence in the moment.
Yeah.
And I felt like it's interesting. I mean, there's a couple like peripheral violence in the moment, things that happen in it, but a lot of it is sort of removed. I feel like that remove was necessary for it, but it also allowed for those page turns to land like extra hard.
Yep.
Because you weren't quite expecting whatever was going to be there, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's honestly the one physical device that you have as a comic writer.
Yeah, for sure.
You got to use it. I mean, it's part of the tools, and it's and there's a lot in the tool bag that you can do, but that's one of the big ones.
Okay, and it's interesting you mentioned those tools, right? One of those other tools I think is selecting the right heightened moment to accentuate something in comics. I feel like because it's such a static medium, you have to really find the right time within an action, within a moment to say that's the point of impact, that's the point of action. And I think the way that you, as you mentioned, you kept that sort of curtailed, so that way the page turn and the suspense is that much more effective at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I appreciate that. Thank you, man.
One of the other things, and I wanted to ask you this specifically, was the animals. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You have Sam, and there's an issue where she's confronted, one with herself, but then also with this beast form of what a bear is, right?
Yeah.
And there were two things kind of crossing my mind in that. One was there's irony there. Obviously, the fact that she is this, upright, anthropomorphic, bipedal being who can talk and communicate, and is confronted with a bear killing an animal for survival, and then killing another bear for survival.
Yeah.
When she's doing this for fun, right? So how do you? It's all coming. It's like what are you trying to say there, if anything at all, about the human condition and whether or not someone actually crosses the line into this bestiality? Because realistically, they're more animal than she is, but I would consider her more of the monster.
Right. Well, it's to say, like, maybe nature's not necessarily monstrous, but nature could be very, like, cold-blooded in its indifference.
Okay.
And so, I mean, to me, it was I'm very hesitant to come out and say like exactly what I think you should think about it.
For sure.
But I'll tell you, the inspiration for it all, like, honestly, came from those Richard Scarry children's books.
Okay.
Which, like, Busy Town was like the big Richard Scarry town, and there's all these anthropomorphic animals. But then in the books, they literally have like them walking dogs, or like there's one of the, I think it's What Do People Do All Day? It's one of the books, and on the front you see like a couple of shop fronts, and one of them's a butcher shop.
Yep.
And I 100% took that inspiration to do the butcher shop in my book. And it was just like, his book, it's like a pig that works at the butcher shop. And there's like sausage links or whatever, like from the window. And you're like, that's so messed up.
Yeah.
Like, and they're obviously like, I don't think it was done ironically. Like, I think it was earnest, but I mean, like, I just don't think they thought about it. Or like,
For sure.
Or maybe it was done tongue in cheek. Like, it was so messed up though. And I was like, well, we have to have like a butcher shop. And like, I kept taking it further. I was like, well, they have to have like, we should have animals be the only ones that know what she's doing.
Yeah.
And it made total sense to have nature see the truth of like what Sam's deal was. And then also it just seems so interesting to have Sam do such an unnatural thing.
Yes.
It's such a natural setting.
Yeah.
And that it's also like the weirdness of it also, I think, has something to say about her own like kind of inability to ever really, she almost isn't really introspective at all.
Mm-hmm.
She just kind of does what she does because she's, whatever. But
so there's no remorse there.
But it's also, exactly. But it's also a stumbling block, I think, for her, in her own psychology of like not necessarily, because she never really thought why she does what she does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was essentially like
Okay.
in a nutshell what all was kind of steering me with that.
Yeah, and I would say for anybody who's hearing that and doesn't quite understand, go read the book.
Oh, please, yeah,
You
please
have
do.
to, in order to understand the moments we're referencing. I think in order to understand the poignancy of that specific moment, again, picking the right pieces, the right places to accentuate things, to accentuate action,
Sure.
and just to take that visual and literary metaphor. Amazing. I loved it. Loved it.
Thank you very much.
One of the two last questions.
Sure.
Hatzman Elhau is a wonderful letterer. I've been
yeah.
following him for years. He has a great YouTube channel, which I don't know that it still exists. Panel Strip Naked.
Yeah, Strip Panel Naked's awesome.
Strip Panel Naked. And then also he's a great Twitter follow. Really insightful about the industry. What did you go out and seek this individual?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hey.
Yep.
And there you have it. Thank you so much.
I honestly did not think he would say yes, but I was just like, well, let's aim for the top and see what happens and whatever. I mean, there were, and I mean, there are a bunch of awesome letterers, and he was definitely like, at the top of my list. I feel like, and I mean, there would have been other letterers that would have also been awesome to work with, obviously. But he was one of those guys that I had really admired the work that he put into Strip Panel Naked and then Panel by Panel, the magazine.
Yeah.
And it was the passion that he had for the medium. And it's one of those things where, like, I was kind of explaining, like, you could be talking about, like, mushrooms or whatever. If you've got that passion, you make me want to check out mushrooms. But I mean, it's like that. Sure. He's bringing that to comics. So I'm doubly just kind of like, this is incredible. Like, I'm going out and reading basically all the books that he's profiling.
Same.
Because his enthusiasm, like, this is why I think this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then, like, and here's why, like, and yes, and this is a very great insight. I too think that is awesome. And so to have that level of thoughtfulness brought to your book is like such a blessing. And he, and has said as much in interviews, like, he brings a lot to the book. Like, he'll bring stuff to it that, like, he'll just throw it out there as a he'll audition stuff in the lettering file that the first one you get back. And like 99.9 of those are like awesome.
Yeah.
They all add to it. His like, what do you want to say? His eye for performance is terrific.
Yeah.
And what he brings even stronger through the way he does this dialogue, or the way he does captions, or like the blood splatter on the captions that he throws, like just
so
little
good.
touches like that.
Yeah.
There's honestly always like one or two sweet little like surprises that'll pop up in a file. And it's awesome. Like, I feel so lucky to have him on board.
It's dynamic, and it's one of those things that I feel like gets underappreciated in comics. So when you see good lettering, you notice good lettering.
For sure. I mean, it's, and again, like, I mean, lettering is like, as long as you understand what's happening and whatever.
Yeah, it's functional.
Good. Yeah, it's functional. And then if you can just kind of put a little more love into it and thought, and it's, it can elevate the whole thing. It's crazy.
100%. Last question of the day. We have heard that you will be coming out. You will be announcing The Rite of Spring.
Yeah.
A follow-up sequel to Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about that?
Sure. Yeah. 100%. So Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring it's going to be a follow-up that takes place around 8 years after the events of the first book. So the first book's like set in the 80s. This one's set in the early 90s.
Okay.
And with that comes the, commercial internet. And it comes like, corporate land development for urban sprawl. Essentially, like, Sam's feeling the world getting smaller.
Sure. Yeah.
And in many ways, she's sort of reassessing her place in it. With that, an element that comes directly from her actions in the past is coming to the forefront. And she sees this and, like, very intentionally decides to interact with it in a very specific way. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah.
But,
Hey.
But what's fun is that, like, a lot of the characters that have survived from the first book are coming back, and now 8 years on, we're seeing what the impacts were on them, psychologically, and also just the nuts and boltsness of it all. And so I'm super excited about it, and very excited that it gets to be part of this new IDW Dark. And it has a home, and we have a slightly larger format to work in. It's going to be great.
Oh, okay. Very exciting news. I'm personally am thrilled to see you get a continuation on this series, but I'm also thrilled to see your career as you continue to work your way into comics. For me, I hadn't heard your name prior to this, so I'm really appreciative that there are creators who are pushing the boundaries, who are pushing the bounds of what comics can be. So I'm thankful for that.
Oh, dude, I appreciate it. I mean, I honestly I'm just waiting to see what doesn't work or what works. Like, it's like I don't honestly know what I'm doing necessarily, but like it's been so encouraging just being amongst all these people. I'm getting to say hi to like heroes of mine for like years of reading comics, and just now they know my name, and it's blowing my mind.
That's amazing. Well, we here at Pals HQ are going to be following your career, and for anybody else at home, thank you for tuning into another interview. Again, we'll be at New York Comic Con all weekend, putting out videos, putting out commentary, putting out just a plethora of things. So definitely stay tuned to the YouTube channel. Come join us on Discord, and then also join our Patreon for any support. Thank you guys so much, and Patrick, thank you so much again.
Dude, I appreciate it. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on.